free flight to any place else, basically, in the vicinity from Hawaii to Guam. So on our first vacation in Guam, we decided to go to Japan. And a friend of mine there in the art department had said, if you go to Kyoto, you certainly go to this gallery. It's called Gallery Coco. And he said, you really like it. And so we went to Gallery Coco, which turned out to be one of the, well, the leading gallery in Japan in modern art, and actually one of the top 20 leading artists in the world in modern art. And we were showing pretty much all these artists then. And we bought a couple things, including this cute little matchbook here, and a painting of people doing the same things they're doing on the matchbook cover, and sort of put it in the back of our minds until after our tour of duty in Guam was over and we were traveling, went back and talked to her, and then came back to California, and I learned one thing is that I didn't like being a teacher, especially in college. I didn't like the politics. And we were financially in a pretty good position because we had free housing and salaries were good. And everything was still cheap here. So we bought a house in Marin and opened an art gallery on Upper Grand Avenue in 1971 and started out with Japanese artists, which basically the gallery specialized in for probably close to 15 years. And originally we worked with this gallery, and she would send us artists' works on approval or people that we had seen. And then after a few years, she said, you know, you ought to get to know some of these artists. And she gave me some addresses, and most prominently this man's address. The other story is, as you'll see, all the titles on these are in English. The other thing that impresses, backtrack a bit, is when we were there, we saw all these Americans buying work from her. Because at that time, it was during the Vietnam period, all these companies like Xerox and Kodak and so forth had offices here. And the dollar was super strong, and they were supporting these artists. The Japanese were not. The Japanese didn't get this work at all. Almost all these artists spoke fluent English. Many of them had lived overseas in Paris, New York, for various periods of time. They were almost all fluent in English. They were almost all in their 30s, a few a little older. And the work that they were doing, of course, was very different from what, well, I don't know, just to backtrack even a little bit more, I don't know if a lot of you are familiar with Japanese art. You know, really what they had in Japan was basically screens, scrolls. You know, they didn't really have contemporary paintings. A lot of Japanese artists had gone to Paris and studied, but what they made is just sort of knockoffs of Western, especially Impressionist work. But there was nothing particularly Japanese. In fact, even today, the Japanese don't really collect art. A number of reasons. One is the Japanese government doesn't give a tax allowance for donations to museums. The other factor is most Japanese housing is about 700 square feet. But what they were doing prior to that was, you know, work like this kind of thing. You know, this kind of thing, and most, you know, woodcuts of flowers, of temples. Then after the Second World War, they started some paintings, but a lot of it was pretty grim. I don't know if you can see this one. It's a woman hanging, and you know, it's very, very gruesome. It's very political. A lot of anti-war things, but not particularly Japanese. So what happened is quite a few of these people had been studying overseas in New York or in Paris and whatever. And of course, the major technique in Japan was woodblock printmaking. And it was made in the traditional way. The artist would do a drawing or a painting and then have it printed. So so during especially the 19th century, but even the 18th century, the famous ukiyo-e prints of, like samurai and geisha and so forth that everybody knows about, and which were used to wrap ceramics in, and then the French got hold of them, and you see a lot of influences in 19th century French art. But these artists didn't want other people to make their work. They wanted to make it all themselves. And these works are mostly notable for incredible techniques that only one person could do. I was just amazed at some of the things that I first saw there. I'd never seen anything like this in the West. And I thought, well, I was always interested, of course, in Japanese culture. And I really thought about doing something that I would like to do maybe in a non-verbal venue rather than in terms of writing or teaching or something. And nobody over here was showing this work. I've certainly never seen it. Of course, there were hardly any galleries here then either. I think there was maybe 10 or 12 galleries in San Francisco. In fact, I was just talking to somebody about that the other day, that all the galleries that were there then are no longer here. In fact, if you look at the list of galleries from 1985, and only one or two are left. So I'll open this gallery in Victoria, across the street from the old spaghetti factory in North Beach. Knocked out a couple of walls in a space about, 3 times bigger than this, and show exclusively Japanese artists. So long story short, I wrote this artist, Soichi Ida, and said, we're going to come to Kyoto, and I'd like to meet you. And he wrote me back on a beautiful piece of white Japanese paper, "Dear Don Soker, please come to my studio, I wait." And so we went to his studio, Carol and I, and he was very kind, very generous, fluent English, and he lived in a wonderful house very close to the Temple of the Golden Pavilion. And he was just the perfect host. And then along at the same time, I met some other artists, Akira Kurizaki, who did this, also lived in Kyoto. Some artists got along, some artists didn't. Over the period of time, like for example, Kurizaki introduced me to the man who did the red printer, whose name is Izumi, who lived in Osaka, and took me down to one of the most incredible sushi dinners I've ever had. And Masaru Ikeda, who lived mostly in New York, and actually I'm just waiting for a catalog now, I just forgot to get it. We're good friends. Tetsuya Noda and Kurizaki were very good friends. This man, Kunio Nagaoka, lived in Berlin, mostly East Berlin, for about 25 years, so I didn't meet him until much later. He was fascinated by the armor that he saw in museums in Japan, and started doing these meticulous etchings. But he didn't really show in Japan that much. He showed mostly in Europe. And Matsutani was at that time doing mostly prints. He started out doing drawings, but he went to Paris, and what I knew of his work were prints he studied at this atelier run by Stanley William Hayter that a lot of printmakers have gone to. And actually the founders of that found that people that worked there started a place called Kalai in Berkeley. And so he was there at the same time as they were there, so they knew him too, although we met independently. Like I had met, in Japan, I initially met him, Kurizaki, Yasuzuka, who did the big screen. At the time I started the gallery, came to the San Francisco Art Institute on a Fulbright scholarship for 2 years. And he had sent over this screen and 2 others, one of which that was acquired by the Museum of Modern Art. I want to say the face as it was this waves. Essentially, it's very complicated print. It's 4 separate silk screens. Each silk screen is printed 4 times. And there's amazing visual effects. I spent some time looking at it. It's a totally unique thing. So I got to know him, of course, very well, and then I he had a beautiful house in a little village outside of Kyoto, a traditional Japanese house. And I'd get there and fly to Osaka, take the train to Kyoto and go to his house, jump into his furrow. So this artist, Kurzaki was in Kyoto as well too, although again he's been over here a lot more since. And Ida was in Kyoto. Nora was, I mostly actually for the first, I suppose 10 years, spent most of my time in Kyoto. So I didn't know too many people in Tokyo. And then I met Noda. I had his prints. I had his work, but I didn't meet him. And then I became very good friends with him. He lives a little bit outside of Tokyo. Also, his wife, he speaks fluent English. His wife is the daughter of the former ambassador to Israel. So they knew everybody in Tokyo. And also, he travels a lot, taught a lot. Akira Matsumoto, who did this one, which is actually a woodcut one. The only woodcut in the show. I mean, here you've got, this is a lithograph, which is unusual, because if you know this man's work, he does almost exclusively woodblock and silkscreen prints in a series called Diary. It's done probably close to 500 over about a 45-year period, documenting his family life, just a catalog where you want to see more. But this is very unusual, and it is a lithograph. But like a lot of other things, this is 7 plates. As is, like that is like 12 wood, 7 plates. This is only 2 woodblock plates. But if you look closely, you'll notice that each dot is cut out of the woodblock. So basically, he made a photograph on a woodblock. He's the only artist that was trained as a traditional, ukiyo-e traditional printer. So he has done prints in every field: lithographs, silkscreen, etching, and every one of them is just a ton of weight. Like he does the silkscreen, 20 cherries, each cherry is a separate silkscreen. Same with Shigeru Izumi, like this is like 25 color silkscreen. A couple of these people were very prominent painters. Izumi was, and Urasato, who did this very colorful sort of mandala out there, they also did very, very intricate paintings. I mean, you can see people working like 20 paintings at a time. He was quite old. He died, probably about 75. But both he and Izumi, if you look at his catalog, they're in every modern museum really in the world. Several of these people have been, Matsutani, who did this, is now in the new upcoming Venice Biennale. He's going to have 2 installations there. He was a member of a group called Butai, which started in Osaka, but was not so much about prints, although he was doing prints, but he was founding member of Butai, and mainly known for drawing. He would do drawings that are 60 feet long, and would take a month to do every day. He would just, you can see some of the cows, he'd be drawing, do a whole wall, and then he would just dump some mineral spirits on it, so it would just totally destroy the concept of the total work and fine concept into an accident. So this is another interesting thing about this kind of work in terms of concept is differing from Western conceptual art, which is sort of a standalone thing that is more of an artist statement. These are more like the artist concept. This is something I really like about the kind of work I show, is that it's mainly about process and about layers of meaning, layers of material, and the process that goes into it. And they really make it pretty obvious. I mean, if you look at it closely, you think, this is not just one thing. There's something else going on there. I think this is the case really with a lot of the artists that I show too, is that they spend a lot of time on the work. They use unusual materials too. Like some of these, well, of course, these are mainly prints, but even in prints, the type of printmaking that they do is unparalleled. It's like not one-on thing. It's like, if you're doing an etching, it's 5 kinds of etchings, 3 plates. Everything is just super, super difficult. Even with silkscreen or woodcut too. Or if you do like he did a lot of prints too, but like he's using all kinds of found materials here, earth, twigs, stone. The ceramic here, this man was trained, this is, he was trained as a traditional ceramic artist, but instead of using clay, he uses carbon, industrial ceramic in carbon, and fires it at 2,000 degrees. This is one of his very earliest ones, but there's another smaller one up there. So he's been using carbon instead of clay, but it is a natural material. In fact, carbon is what people are made with. And he's so fascinated with it. One of the things he's most fascinated about is when he fires the material, how much of the material evaporates, is gone. Like, where does it go? And each time you fire it, a little bit more goes. So he plays with it. Sometimes he puts glass on it, or he adds other materials to it. His best friend, same thing with Yoshinaga, is just simple handmade paper, many, many layers of paper. But if you look closely at this, it's got 4 or 5 other colors under the black. And it's built up, and it's built up, and it's built up. Matsutani, the same thing. He did the man who did the drawings. He did this actually when he was here doing one of these drawings too. It's found materials, it's a stone, but he's always used like an industrial material along with it, latex with it, and sumi. So you get your found material, your industrial material, your traditional material together. So I say it's sort of a commonality to all of these works. It's almost like a school, which isn't a school anymore. 4 of these artists are dead, and most of the other ones either stopped working or making other works. Main reason is there's no support. There's never has been support in Japan for their own artists, which is why it's always been design or architecture, things like that. Certainly Japanese architecture. But the Japanese never collected. The museums and galleries are all rental galleries. When they collect French Impressionism or blue chip artists. So these artists basically found their audience over here, what little they had. And there weren't that awful many of them. First of all, you had to have money to be an artist in Japan. The galleries rented for, even then, like $1,000 a week, and the gallery took 60%. So it was a very unfriendly atmosphere for an artist. So that's one reason why a lot of them got over here if they could. But in many cases, I've had several artists recently that, in fact, I've sponsored a couple of Japanese for green cards. In fact, Demetros, I'm sponsoring her for a green card. It's so difficult for artists to stay here. But a lot of these artists, had homes and families and things, and they couldn't do that. Just before the gallery opened, some young Japanese guy wandered in here. I said, well, he spoke very, very little English. I asked him, I speak some Japanese. He says, do you live in Japan? He says, well, I'm just traveling. And, and I was saying, oh, you can't stay. He says, no, it's just a travel visa. Because they cannot stay unless, they can, well, now it's much more difficult than then. So anyway, the point being is that unless, and even today, like the major Japanese artists, people like Sugimoto or Munakai or, Nara, all the well-known Japanese artists show here or live here because they can't possibly, they may still live in Japan, but they can't possibly sell anything like they can sell overseas. So anyway, that's why another reason why I don't show much Japanese art anymore, because there isn't much Japanese art made anymore. In fact, the gallery system in Japan now is far, far worse than when I started. After this gallery, Koko, there was 1 or 2 galleries in Tokyo and a few others, but nothing really like it was at that time. And that time, again, was supported mainly by the American economy boom there. And then still, when the dollar was cheap, then all of a sudden, the yen got strong again. And nobody was going over there. And now you go over there and, there'll be rental galleries, you can see things, but they don't really carry artists' work. If you want to find these artists, well, you will find these artists. So, anyway, that's the history of the gallery and why this work is here and why you won't see it anyplace else. So,